Hello and welcome into this edition of the Golf Show podcast with Rex and Lab. Well, yes, it is September 24th, 2025, the year of our Lord. And Rex, we finally have wireless microphones. You've been asking for it. You've been clamoring for it. You've been making fun of us relentlessly, not just this year, but in prior years. Now, Rex, we can actually do this like we're doing actual television. We're not going to be doing it for the Made for TV edition, which will be on Sunday night, but we can do it for mini podcasts, and we're certainly going to do it for this preview edition of the Ryder Cup. What do you think?
Two things. One, I feel like I'm standing too close to you. We're gonna really do this for 30 or 40 minutes. That's gonna make me a little uncomfortable. And two, why can't I clip this to my?
It's got a sound.
The sound is better. You're sure about that?
I'm positive. 90% certain.
Please let us know.
Please let us know if you like this. If you hate this, we are somewhere in the media center at Bethpage Black. Rex, how was your Ryder Cup week been going? You and I both got here on Monday. That was the first team day practice for Team USA. Europe, of course, came the previous week for a 2-day reconnaissance mission, scouting Bethpage Black, making sure their pairings were exactly how they wanted them. How has your Ryder Cup week gone so far?
It's such a strange animal. I was talking with someone about this earlier today. The Ryder Cup is a 2-year buildup. It's unlike any other event that we would talk about. Like the Masters kind of falls into this a little bit because we start talking about it usually after the last putt drops at the Open Championship. But this is 2 years. This is 24 months. Talking about it, speculating, captain's picks, who's going to be the captain, who's not going to get a pick. All of those things build up to this moment. And I would imagine under normal circumstances, we would get pretty tired of talking about it. But that's not the case. I think you and I both have spent a good amount of time on TV talking about it. We're going to spend a good amount of time on the podcast. Keep going back to it. The Ryder Cup is the content gift that just keeps on giving. And look, we can get into Stipengate. We can get into potential pairings. We've seen a lot from both teams this week. We can get into the weather, which is certainly going to factor into this decision. It never stops.
Let's start with the weather because I think that's of most interest right now. We're actually recording this about mid-afternoon on Wednesday. Just finished up my 3-hour shift on live from you on the 3-hour shift in the morning with the 5 a.m. wake-up call. But they do have the opening ceremony on Wednesday, 2 days prior to the start of the Ryder Cup, because they are anticipating potentially a washout on Thursday. And so there's the music, there's the pageantry, there's the speeches. Keegan Bradley, the U.S. captain, has mentioned he's been practicing, Rex, about 2 or 3 hours on the teleprompter at home in South Florida to make sure that he can deliver it. I sort of agree with that. Reading from a teleprompter is harder than it looks. The Anna Jacksons, the Cara Banks, the Rich Learners of the world make it look very easy. You don't want to make it look like you're reading when you're doing a teleprompter. Kudos to Keegan Bradley for leaving no stone unturned in his preparation.
Our friend Steve Sands, our friend Todd Lewis, they all do it really well, and you and I have struggled mightily since we've been at Golf Channel. I think you and I are still both trying to wrap our mind around it, because you're right. Of course I can sit and read. We can all do that, but you need to do it in a way that is personal. And I think Keegan has done a magnificent job this week of keeping things pretty low-key. I mean, he wants this to be an emotional week for Team USA. You saw that on the first tee on Monday, all the things he had in store for his team when they walked out of that tunnel. But the weather is certainly at the top of the list. I felt like our friend Steve Bukowski was just seething with jealousy this morning when I did a weather report right off the top of the ones, because this is going to impact play one way or the other. You mentioned they moved up the closing ceremony. It's because there's going to be varying shades of awful on Thursday as this storm comes through. This is a serious front. It's now gone up to a 90% chance of storms. The part that's 90% chance of showers. The part that stood out to me was wind gusts possibly up to 45 miles an hour. Where you and I live, they name storms like that.
Speaking of Burko, he's going to be plenty busy. We got dueling hurricanes in the Atlantic. They're going to be coming to Florida next week. I'm sure he'll be very eager for that. So, yes, there are no pairings being announced on Wednesday. That'll still go off on Thursday, sort of as scheduled, 4 p.m. Eastern time, just at a to-be-determined location. Not sure the players are actually going to be in attendance for that. So it could be just a quick reveal like we see at the President's Cup, and then some question and answers after that while we dig into those pairings. And so we have the same pageantry, we have the same speeches, player introductions, so on and so forth, but no pairings being announced on Wednesday. Very important to point out. It does create an interesting dynamic, though, Rex, doesn't it? Where if you do have a potential washout on Thursday, and they're calling for anywhere from a half an inch to rain to potentially an inch of rain, some electricity in the Long Island area as well. It does create a scenario where you could have a rookie who maybe doesn't play until Friday afternoon, scheduled for the 4 balls, is sitting in sort of their nervous energy for 48 hours. So if you do have a situation where you go 2 days without really hitting a competitive shot at Bethpage, do you give an edge ever so slightly even early in the proceedings to one team or the other?
Perhaps I would say, as you pointed out, the Europeans seem to have the most experience based on that scouting trip that they took up here. And it's worth pointing out, you said it, like there's only about an inch of rain, even with all the horrible things that I just said about the forecast. And it's been really dry. It's dusty out there right now. You and I have both experienced. Though I don't think playability of the golf course is going to factor into this. The part that, to your point, that is interesting, we were talking with Kevin Kisner, one of the vice captains for Team USA, and we were specifically asking about right now, the tee times for Thursday for both teams are around 10 to 11 o'clock. They're just going to play 9 holes as they get ready to do their final preparations for Friday's opening sessions. He said they could move that because there would be a window if you decided to tee off at maybe 8 a.m. Both teams going off 1 and 10, only playing 9 holes. And so I think there is still the possibility that they'll get out there. But Kiz did say something because I kind of said, well, if both teams have plenty of experience on this golf course, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal if Thursday was a washout. And he could not have shaken his head harder and pushed back on the idea. And he goes, the idea of not doing anything the day before a major event, let alone the Ryder Cup, would drive him nuts. He said he had to get out and just play 1 hole if that's all it took, because the nerves are just going to eat you alive.
I mean, you have 4 rookies on the U.S. side. You look at the European side, 11 returning starters. Even the 12th, Rasmus Højgaard, was a part of the inner circle, seeing how things operated in Rome 2 years ago. So it's not like there's a whole lot of unknowns that they're going to face. Now, this is sort of an unprecedented situation. I can't ever remember the opening ceremony being moved up a day, potentially having a complete idle day. Like, you can't go to the movies in Melville. You can't. You can only work out. You can work out for an hour or so, but you can't do that all day. Like, just I think the possibility of just sort of sitting and wondering, and if you're an American, not being able to ask a veteran, like, well, how are we going to kill the time? I don't know, man. This is the first time I'm going through this too. It does create a very interesting situation. I did want to touch something on with the golf course and Bethpage Black. No surprises was the way that Paul McGinley described it on last week's podcast in terms of the scouting trip and what he saw from the golf course. They anticipated they were going to have wide corridors, short rough, speedy greens, soft and receptive. However, it's exactly what we see here. 2 inches of rough, sort of off the tee shots, about 3 inches of rough around the greens. But again, the greens are not all that complicated. A lot of slope from back to front, but nothing too severe in terms of the wild undulations like we saw at Oakmont for the U.S. Open, for example. When you look at the golf course setup, when you talk to the players and the captains, what has been your takeaway from that? And do you think the U.S. advantage is as stark as maybe it was at a Hazeltine?
Well, first, our friend Paul McGinley, he was pretty outspoken. The captain, the home captain, Keegan Bradley in this case, gave up control of the golf course on Sunday. So he no longer has control of it. Certainly, the captain decided what this golf course was going to look like. And I have to be honest with you, both you and I went for walks on Monday just to see the golf course, see what it looked like. I remember walking down the left side of the 12th fairway and just being taken by, it didn't feel like Bethpage. Normally, you're walking through the rough, and it's an effort. You have to pick your feet up because the rough is always so thick. It was that way for both the U.S. Opens that were played here. It's been that way for the playoff events that have been played here on the PGA Tour.
Only a couple players under par.
It's just the animal that is Bethpage. The rough is now 2 inches. By comparison, the last time the PGA Championship was played here back in 2019, it was 3.5 inches. That doesn't sound like much until you're actually walking through it and you realize that, you can play out at 2 inches. Like, there's no real guesswork when it comes to that. Maybe you can't spin the ball quite as much, but there's no real guesswork. Now, it's a little bit thicker around the greens. I will say, and this got brought up this morning on the early live from shift that I was on, there was a time not that long ago, 6 years ago, when we were in Paris for that Ryder Cup, where it was an extreme advantage to the European team. Thomas Bjorn, the captain of the European team, knew exactly what he was doing in setting that golf course up. The Americans had a team full of bombers, but not necessarily straight ball strikers, and that golf course was just set up brutally difficult off the tee. The U.S. team would have had a better week if they would have played their vice captains. It was Matt Kuchar, it was Jim Furyk, it was Zach Johnson,
Stricker,
Webb Simpson, like straight drivers of the golf ball.
Yeah.
They had no chance the way that was set up. I think that's dialed back. I think we've gotten closer to something that, I'm not going to say it's a neutral setup, but I feel like more Europeans live in South Florida than live in Europe. They play the PGA Tour almost exclusively. They're used to fast greens. They're used to all the things that the American side seems to think gives them advantage. I don't think it's the golf course that gives the home team an advantage. I think it's the crowd.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I talked to 2 European players this week. They described the golf course here at Bethpage Black as, quote, easy. Now, that means a lot of birdies. It means a lot of excitement. But I think what it also means is when you look at this European team, for taps for the first time in Ryder Cup history, on average, they are slightly longer than the Americans. And so if you can tee off with reckless abandon and just bomb it anywhere and use sort of shorter clubs into what are going to be even more rain-softened greens, I think the advantage that they potentially have from the golf course setup has been neutralized even more. And when you look at the composition of this U.S. team in particular, you can make an argument that actually like a stronger, harder, more U.S. Open-like setup actually may have been more conducive to success. Look at the players who are on this team. Not just J.J. Spawn, who won this year's U.S. Open. Sky Scheffler has a magnificent U.S. Open record. Bryson DeChambeau, 2-time U.S. Open record. Harris English, of the major championships that he has played, he has performed the best in the U.S. Open. Russell Henley, Kyle Morikawa, all of those types of players are very position-oriented, very precise, very accurate. Obviously, we're going to have to see what happens in the competition, but I did think it was notable. The setup is not quite as stark of an advantage as you typically see. Sausage fingers up. I can see it. Please do go ahead.
It's such a weird dynamic.
Yes.
I don't have to. I could have just done the visual, giving you the
Stop
nod.
talking.
You called the People's Country Club easy by comparison. I think in Long Island they
It
would
is.
say, "Whoa, forget about it."
It is easy.
Jake, it is. And I think
Compared to what they could have set it up as, it is absolutely easy. You're going to see a lot of birds. You're going to see a lot of excitement. I think that's probably better for the Ryder Cup, but I do think it neutralizes some of their advantage.
Well, and let's don't take away from this idea. This is an entertainment product. They want the fans to be engaged. They want the fans to be entertained. And I don't know that would be the case if it was set up for a U.S. Open. I tend to agree with you. Probably if Keegan Bradley, with some hindsight, could have said exactly these 12 players and known their records in the U.S. Open, maybe they could have leaned in that direction. But again, I keep going back to the idea that the advantages in any specific statistical category are not so great now to lean in one direction or another when it comes to golf course setup. I just don't believe it anymore.
Yeah, and there's like specific ranges, 200 to 225.
Long iron play.
If your golf course, if your team can perform better in that sort of area, you can set up the golf course or at least make suggestions of where you want the golf course to be set up in that respect to sort of maximize that benefit. But yeah, I think overall it's been a little bit neutralized. You mentioned the crowd, which if you look at the last 5 Ryder Cups, dominated by the home team, average margin of victory is 6.6. I don't think that's necessarily a product of the golf course setup. I do think it has some factor, but I think a lot of it is the psychological effect and impact of playing in front of 50,000 fans who either want you to succeed like none other, or they want to bury you and they want to wish you nothing but the worst. How have your experiences been walking around Bethpage Black? Because I thought it was very interesting that Colin Morikawa, he spoke on Wednesday afternoon here at Bethpage, called them, quote, tame the crowds at this point now, and that he's calling for absolute chaos. Keep in mind, PGA of America has been hand-wringing. They've been anxious. They've been stressed out, wondering, predicting, fearful of what might happen with these New York crowds when you get to the Ryder Cup. And all of a sudden you have an American who's sort of stoking them to inciting other sort of excitement.
It's been a slow burn. You and I both got here on Monday walking around. No fans on the golf course. That was a little surreal, to be honest with you, watching players play. It's grown over the last 2 days. I think today is by far the most people on property. It's gotten a little bit louder. I don't know that you can fully anticipate what happens on Friday morning because you and I both will come through that gate early in the darkness on Friday morning, and we'll hear them singing, waiting to come inside. We hear it every single time, probably overserved, even in the early morning darkness. They've already had too much to drink, and that's just the way it's going to be. I just think I can't overstate this. I don't know that golf is ever going to experience something like this before or after because of the crowds, because of what this golf course means to the community, because this is the red, white, and blue. This just isn't the U.S. Open or PGA Tour playoff event. All the passions that spark, that kindle, that sort of raucous atmosphere that's come to define the Ryder Cup, it's going to be times 10 out there. I don't think Colin Morikawa or anyone on the U.S. side needs to call for it because it's going to be there.
I do agree. It has been tame, and there were a lot of people out on the property. It's a big property. You also have the dynamic.
It's Wednesday, man. It's a work week.
You have a Wednesday ticket. You also have Thursday. Anyone who has a Thursday pass also got in on Wednesday. The PGA of America anticipated that potentially you could not Ryder Cup Plus. What does that involve? Just getting free drinks and food as well?
Yeah.
Very special for them. I do think it's an interesting dynamic, too, with the golf course where it's spectator-friendly in the sense that it's big, but I'm not sure it's a great Ryder Cup spectating course or could be potentially conducive to a lot of roars and a lot of noise because you're sort of cordoned off among the fairways. There are not a lot of open areas other than 16 and 17, which matches might not even get to, or at least not 100% certainty that you're going to get to, where you really can't witness other holes at the same time and sort of keeping track. If you're on the second hole, you're on the second hole. You've really no idea what's going on. That sort of continues throughout the meandering of the golf course. I do think that's going to create a potential dynamic as well. But yeah, I don't think we have to worry about the fans being loud. I will say on the first hole, you and I have both walked out there. We've gone through the tunnel. We've experienced what the players are going to do. So the first tee grandstand is a little bit further removed from the first tee than we've seen in years past. Typically, it's been built practically right on it, and it feels like the cheers and the jeers are raining down on you. You are a little bit removed from that situation, at least here at Bethpage Black.
To your original point, it's a big ballpark, like walking around the golf course on Monday. And Gary Woodland had said this to me. I did a story about what to expect at Bethpage for those who have played in major events here. And he said the first time you came on property, you don't get a grasp of how big the property is until you actually show up. Walking up the 18th hole on Monday, it is a shocking scene because it's very uphill. It's a stark climb going up to the 18th green. It's just everything, the infrastructure built around it is simply massive. And again, I've never seen anything like this in golf. And to your other point, it's not the best viewing golf course. I mean, because again, big, rugged piece of property. However,
a lot of uphill greens as well.
However, there are also a lot of grandstands built around greens. I didn't see too many greens that didn't have something built around them. So that will be put in there. And I will say, and I sort of saw this last year when I came here in October for the walkthrough, they were talking us through how instead of building one amphitheater around the first tee like they've done in the past and another around the 18th green, instead they just built one big massive amphitheater that's around both. They're right next to each other. I had a hard time wrapping my mind around that when I was here last October. Now that you see it, you're right. It's not right on top. It's not Paris, which is I would go back to and say, that's scary. The most impressive thing I've ever seen. However, you know that the volume, just because of the sheer volume, is going to be off the charts.
And just a PSA, this is not a political podcast. This is not a political commentary. If you want to pop off politically in the comments, we super do not care. However, President Donald Trump is going to be on property on Friday. He will not be there for the morning session. He's anticipated to be there in the afternoon session. Should kick off somewhere around the noon lunchtime hour. He is expected to be on the first tee. If you are coming to the Ryder Cup in Bethpage Black, plan accordingly. Come early. The lines are going to be insane. Also anticipate some sort of like TSA type.
They're going to make a bubble. I did a report this morning on Live From about it. The Secret Service is going to create a bubble. Essentially, it's going to be around the clubhouse. It will include the first tee, the 18th green. And the idea being that to get inside that bubble, it will be essentially TSA. And they're warning everyone who is on property on Friday. Again, this is going to be in the afternoon when the president is here, to get here early and to make sure you've looked at exactly what you can have. Because when I looked at that list of things you can't have, umbrellas, folding chairs, like there's a lot of things that you probably thought about bringing, don't.
Again, save your political commentary. I super do not care. It is also pretty cool that the sitting president of the United States
first time in a Ryder Cup
wants to be at the Ryder Cup. All right, Rex, let's talk about players. Let's talk about pairings. Let's talk about what we have seen so far. 18 holes for the Americans on Monday, 18 holes for the Europeans on Tuesday. Again, it's not like they've had a late start this week. They did have the 36-hole practice session the week prior at Bethpage Black. What has stood out to you most about, let's start with the Americans and what they've been trotting out so far?
We're going to have to wait until Thursday afternoon, I believe at 4 o'clock, when the captain's going to make the announcement of pairings. You and I will do another pod, probably a bit more of a mini pod, to sort of review exactly what we saw, getting everybody ready for Friday morning, that opening foursome session. I don't anticipate any surprises. We have kind of seen Keegan Bradley sort of dismiss the idea that he's working with a version of Paul Azinger's pod system, but it seems like not just this week, but going back to Napa when I was there for that training session, whatever you want to call it, for the U.S. team. Starting on Tuesday, those pairings look a lot like what we've seen this week. And by that, I mean Scotty Scheffler has played a lot of golf with Russell Henley. And it's not because Scotty Scheffler likes the University of Georgia and likes talking about Bulldog football.
Big game on Saturday.
Big game. You'll be fine. We'll find a way to work around it. It might be an even more mini pod on Saturday.
Just a cutesy little podcast as Georgia takes on Alabama at home.
That will be an interesting game. It seems obvious that Henley and Scotty, who have a lot of history together, enough history, successful history together in foursomes play, will be playing. I wouldn't be surprised to see them in the first pairing going out. If you want to set the tone, I don't think it's any surprise you've seen Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele play a lot with each other this week. They also have a lot of history. We should anticipate seeing them on Friday morning in the foursome sessions. I think on the other side, we've seen Rory McIlroy and Tommy Fleetwood out shuffling around this week. I would suggest you're going to see them probably in the first group, and then John Rahm and Hatton. Those two, I guarantee we're going to see. So at least half we're going to see on Friday morning. It seems like you and I are not betting men, but I would bet on all of that.
I agree with most of that.
Oh.
I will say you mentioned no surprises.
Maybe.
I think the one big surprise is what Keegan Bradley is going to do with Bryson DeChambeau, who is indisputably one of the best players on that American side. And historically, traditionally, Bryson DeChambeau has only played 4 balls. That's better balls. Let him go out there, let him rile up the crowd, let him make his birdies, let his partner sort of feed off that energy and see how he does. He's had sort of mixed success with that. He did partner successfully with Scotty Scheffler back in 2021. But other than that, it's been a little bit of a mixed bag. What I have seen so far through the week at Bethpage Black is Bryson DeChambeau and Justin Thomas being partnered together on that U.S. pod. I did not see that partnership coming, but since I've done so many hours of television earlier this week, Rex, I've come around to the idea that I think I actually like it. And I really liked a Bryson Ben Griffin 4 balls. But when you look at Bryson's preeminent driving, you look at what Justin Thomas does well, better than anybody else in the PGA Tour, it is his wedge play, particularly that range from like 100 to 150 yards. If Bryson can tee off, again, with reckless abandon, because there's not much punishment, because he can rip it as far and as hard as he possibly can, particularly on that first hole, it makes a lot of sense to partner with a player like Justin Thomas. And both of those players, Bryson and Justin Thomas, have been putting very well in 2025. That, to me, has been the biggest revelation so far, because I did not think we were necessarily going to see Bryson in the alternate short shot format. And I think we are, and it sounds like we might be even seeing him first to tee off.
I'm not 100% in on that one, simply because of his record, as you pointed out, in foursomes play. It's simply not good enough. There's so much pressure on the U.S. team. If you listen to our colleague Mark Roffing, he has said it repeatedly this week that if the United States does not get off to not a good start, but a decent start. I'm not asking them to go 4-0. Mark's not asking them to go 4-0. But if you come out with a 2-2 split, you have to feel really good about yourself. You're Keegan Bradley. The United States got swept on Friday morning in Rome. But
really, there's a huge split between what the U.S. does in foursomes at home and what the U.S. does on the road. Last year, 7-1.
I knew you were going to say that. If you look at it historically, and I'm going to take the modern era, so let's go back to 2008. In that modern era, the U.S. has outscored the European team in 4-ball play by 6 points. In the modern era, the Europeans have outscored the United States 6 points in the foursomes format. So it doesn't matter. You can take out the outlier that is whichever one is the home team. Simply put, statistically, the United States is not as good as at the alternate shot format as the Europeans. Whatever the reason is for that. Like, I'm not taking a deep dive on that right now. I'm not against the idea of not only sending Bryson out early, but sending them out with JT, because all of the statistical dots that you connected, I think, are very good. However,
also play the same golf ball.
I would go the other way. I think Bryson DeChambeau has also played a good amount of golf this week with Cameron Young. I'm not quite sure that they would send him out first, but imagine they play the same golf ball. They hit the ball about the same distance. And imagine a scenario. You pointed out, I did this morning on Live From. Everyone's trying to wrap their minds around what Bryson DeChambeau's role is going to be on this team. Certainly our colleague, Brandon Chambly, had some things to say about that on Live From earlier in the week. There was a moment on Tuesday after the United States finished up their practice round that I think explains exactly what Bryson's role is on that team. After they finished up on 18, he and JT walked over the first tee and got into a massive long driving contest. Bryson hit about a dozen balls, both of them trying to drive the green, just launching them. And throughout it all, the crowd is going nuts. It was just an absolute bizarre zoo-like atmosphere. Even the U.S. team and the caddies all stood around watching in all of this. When it dawned on me, Bryson's job is to be the emotional epicenter of this team. He likes wearing his emotions on his sleeve. Most of the guys on that team don't. Russell Henley doesn't. Scotty Scheffler doesn't. Cam Young doesn't. Patrick Cantlay doesn't. I can keep going on and on. So if someone needs to take the reins and be the one that, okay, you have to get the crowd behind you, and here, you get Cam Young to do it, who's playing really, really well, and he's the native son. He's won here before, the Met Open. He lived not far from here, about an hour from here in Sleepy Hollow. He is the native son. You put those two together, I think that's a potentially potent combination.
And if you go to that Tuesday practice round, if I could do my best Brian Windhorst impersonation.
Please do.
Now, why would Bryce DeChambeau be trying to hit 10 balls off that first tee? Is it because he wants to be a showman? Is it because he wants to show off? Is it because he wants to rile up the crowd? I don't know. There's maybe 1,000 people standing around there. Or Or
There was more than 1,000 people.
was he just trying to prepare himself for what Friday morning could be?
Maybe.
Could he want to drive the green like he did? Remember back in 2021 at Whistling Straits driving that first green as well. It seems to me like Bryson DeChambeau will be the leadoff man again in a format that I did not necessarily anticipate him doing so. It was interesting. You mentioned Europe. And if you're sitting back and looking about what happened in 2023, and Europe went 7-1 in foursomes. Again, 11 returning players. It's the least amount of changeover we've ever seen from one team to the other. You could just have like the lazy assumption, be like, well, just run it back. Just run it back with the exact same pairings that you had in 2023 because it was so successful. Do you anticipate Luke Donald doing that? Or do players change? Do players evolve? And do all of a sudden you have different pairings he could potentially be putting in there?
I think Luke Donald probably more so than any other captain, and there's been a lot of things said about Luke this week, but I would tend to agree with what Keegan Bradley said. There's a chance that he goes down as the greatest Ryder Cup captain, U.S. or Europe, ever, not just depending on what happens this week, but look ahead, maybe what he does at Adair Mana in 2 years, because if he wins this week, imagine the
2 more years.
There you go.
2 more years. Absolutely going to hear it by like 25 people who are here, right? Who like the Europeans.
But I 100% agree that he is going to be flexible. He's not going to look at what happened on Friday morning at Rome and be married to that because he knows these are different players by now. And I think the best example of that, you can sit and say Tommy Fleetwood playing fantastic golf right now. Rory McIlroy clearly playing fantastic golf. They did in Rome, and I'm not quite sure you could justify in my mind why you would split those two up. I'm not sure you could justify in my mind why you would split up Hatton and John Rahm. Again, very, very good team, very prolific, and they have a proven track record, and they seem to match up well on this golf course. The one that stands out, Oberg and Hovland.
Mm-hmm.
Those two were also very, very good in Rome. However, Hovland hasn't played his best golf this season. Oberg maybe hasn't played his best golf this season. I'm not going to be surprised if we see them on Friday morning, but I would understand if he decided to go in a different direction.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one. They were, just so dynamic. They delivered the 9-7 whooping of Scottie Scheffler and Brooks Koepka in Rome. I think that still makes a lot of sense, particularly in the foursomes format, because Ludwig's driving, because Victor Hovland's iron play. To me, that's just such a formidable duo. I do have two really big question marks because Xander Schauffele, we have not seen him since the BMW Championship, did not qualify for the Tour Championship for the first time since he's been a PGA Tour member on the American side. For the Europeans, it's Sepp Straka, who we have not seen a whole lot of. Finished dead last at the Tour Championship, did not play in the BMW PGA. He and his wife had another child, did go last week to the Bethpage to have the scouting mission as well. Where does Sepp Straka sort of fit in? Historically, 2 years ago, he played with Shane Lowry. Shane Lowry's been scuffling a little bit as well. Do you want a player in Sepp Straka whose form has been a little bit of a question mark, a little bit dodgy? Do you want him playing his own ball? Do you want him playing half the shots? Do you want him in a comfortable pairing with Shane Lowry? That, to me, is the biggest question mark, as well as the play of Xander Schauffele and Patrick Cantlay. I don't necessarily think it's a given we're going to see them. This isn't 2019. This isn't 2021, where you just know you have a ready-made pairing in those two and send them out. They did go 0-2 together in Rome. Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele did. They only played foursomes together last year at the President's Cup. Went 1-1 in those situations.
And to go to Sepp Straka and Xander Schauffele, the through line is both of them just celebrated the birth of the couple's first child. So I think we can sit and look. You're right, and both
understandable, but they are rusty.
Absolutely, not just rusty. This is Xander Schauffele's worst season on the PGA Tour. Now, the fact he made it to the second playoff event shows you that he's still a really good player. But it's been 38 days since he hit a shot that mattered. He said he started practicing it again about 2 weeks ago, and that is the big question mark, I think, for Keegan Bradley. There's a lot of things you can sit and worry about. How are the four rookies going to respond to what you and I both have described as going to be an unbelievably intense atmosphere? Even if they're on your side, you still have to stand in that crucible and find a way to pull the club back and hit a good shot and get on your way. It's much easier said than done, but I think both of those players are question marks for their respective captains. And I think when you have a question mark, most captains are going to default to what they feel the most comfortable with. And I would argue that in this situation, because of Luke Donald's ready-made team, he's got a lot of things to fall back on.
Yeah, Xander's just it's a really tricky puzzle because a year ago, you never would have thought that you'd be in this position with Xander Schauffele. Yeah. At the time, he just won 2 major championships, undisputed number 2 player in the world behind Scottie Scheffler. You could count on him for 4, maybe 5 matches. Now, even Xander Schauffele and Keegan Bradley mentioned, like, hey, sending messages over the past couple weeks. Hey man, how's your form? How's things looking? How's your game? How's it coming around? You weren't completely comfortable sort of midway through those FedEx Cup playoffs. He said that the break he had, about 5 weeks, was as much mental as it was physical after such a disappointing season for Xander Schauffele. I'm very curious to see when he plays and with whom and how often. Do you want to get into predictions today, Rex, or do you want to save that for the mini pod that we're going to have on Thursday after the pairings for the Friday morning foursomes are announced at 4 p.m. on Thursday?
We can save them. I think both of you and I have batted this around a little bit, that the fact of the matter is the home team has won 8 of the last Ryder Cups. And the one outlier of that is literally called a miracle at Medina. So it's hard to wrap your mind around the idea that somehow the home team's not going to pull this off. But I don't care how you slice it statistically, on paper, world ranking wise, whatever. The Europeans clearly have the better team. That doesn't always.
Clearly.
I would say
they clearly have the better team. Using what metric?
Team. I would say team, not better players. I'm not talking about, clearly the United States has the better players if you're going by the world ranking.
Isn't a team a collection of players?
That's my point. I think you made my point for me. It is the collection of players. I think this is the same group, sans one twin. We got the other twin instead of Rasmus this time around, who just laid it on the Americans last time around. Different golf course, different crowd, home team, but it is going to be hard to wrestle my mind around either one of those being truly favorites.
I'm not going to give my pick for the Ryder Cup because at this point, as I sit here mid-afternoon on Wednesday,
what a tease.
I don't have my pick yet.
I don't either.
I have a way that I'm leaning, but I'm not ready to go there quite yet. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of the Golf Channel Podcast with Rex and Lab. You guys know the drill. NBCSports.com/golf, aka golfchannel.com, which is relaunching in just a couple of weeks for all the latest news, notes, and updates. As a reminder, Rex and I will be back in 24 hours to give instant reaction to the Friday morning foursomes. Again, that's alternate shot. That is what is kicking off the 45th playing of the Ryder Cup. So at that point, we'll break down the pairings, we'll give our predictions, man the match, X factor, biggest disappointment, and the like. Should be about 15 to 20 minutes. Hope you'll join us for that one as well. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the support. We'll talk to you guys Thursday afternoon.